Hey young friends, Dr. Bill here. Once again, we're going to pay attention, as we have for the last several weeks, to one of Jesus' disciples. And our focus today is on Thomas. Now, all four Gospels record the fact that Jesus called Thomas to be one of his disciples. Nevertheless, it's John who gives us the fullest portrait of what Thomas was like. He gives us the fullest sketch of Thomas's character and how he thought about things. So we begin by looking at a few passages where John tells us about Thomas. In the first, it happens in John 11. Jesus has just gotten word that one of his dearest friends, a man named Lazarus, is near death. Lazarus lives in the province of Judea. And John tells us that already there were some in Judea who were planning to take Jesus' life. So if Jesus was going to go see Lazarus, visit him, well, Jesus would be taking a big risk. He would be putting himself in danger. Obviously, Jesus decided to go. And it's Thomas, out of all the disciples, who says something very important. He says, well, if he's going to go and he's going to die, let us die with him. In other words, Thomas recognized the danger and said, well, if Jesus is going to die, then we should die with him. That's a pretty impressive comment. That shows us that Thomas was indeed courageous. And then, in the second episode, which occurs in John chapter 14, Jesus has just spoken to his disciples about his death and his departure. And he says, don't be alarmed, don't be afraid, because I will be back with you. And I want you to know that I have prepared a place for all of you, and you'll always be welcome. And Jesus then says, well, and you know the way. You know how this is going to unfold. Well, Thomas sort of scratches his head and says, Lord, we don't know the way. You need to flesh this out. You need to tell us more about what this way is. So Thomas very candidly admits that he didn't understand what Jesus was talking about. He candidly admits that he couldn't wrap his mind around what Jesus was talking about. And then in the final episode, which occurs in John chapter 20, right after Jesus had been raised from the dead, that very evening, on the Sunday of Jesus' resurrection, all of the disciples were gathered in a special place. All of them except Thomas. And Jesus appeared in their midst and showed them his wounds, showed them that he was indeed raised. Well, obviously the other disciples were excited, and so they went out and found Thomas, and they said, we have seen the Lord. And Thomas said, okay, that's all right, but let me tell you, I will not believe unless I see him for myself, and unless I can probe the wounds in his hands and in his side, and then I will believe. Well, John tells us that a week later, once again, the disciples gathered on a Sunday evening. This time, Thomas was present. And again, Jesus appeared in their midst, and he made a beeline for Thomas. And he said, Thomas, look, here I am. Go ahead, put your finger in the wounds of my hands. Put your hand in the wound that's on my side. And Thomas suddenly realized that indeed Jesus had been raised. And he makes this powerful confession. He says, my Lord and my God. Well, all of those things add up to something with regard to a portrait of who Thomas was. On the one hand, he was a realist. He looked at things and just saw them as they were. That's what's going on when Jesus decides to go see Lazarus, and Thomas says, well, if he's going to die, let's go die with him. He wasn't trying to avoid reality. He was just stating what the possibilities and the potential was. He was trying to speak for all the disciples and say, we know how dangerous this is. And then we see Thomas kind of unable to wrap his mind around what Jesus was saying. He couldn't quite understand what Jesus meant by, you know the way. Thomas was the kind of disciple that said, I need for you to spell it out for me. I don't need for you to talk to me in riddles. I need for you to give it to me in a form that I can understand. And then finally, Thomas was full of questions. When Jesus was raised, he was kind of a realist there too. He said, look, the dead don't come back. The dead do not get up and walk again. But when he met Jesus, the risen Christ, he suddenly realized that yes, not everything is as it appears. So we learn from Thomas the importance of recognizing that beneath all of the reality that we experience, the stuff that's right in front of us every single day, well, Thomas learns and shows us that we need to have our eyes opened, that there's more going on at any one moment than we can possibly know. God is at work in ways that we do not understand and can't always comprehend. God is at work in spite of the fact that we may have our own set of questions and our own set of doubts. For that reason, Thomas is one of my heroes, and I hope that you'll pay attention to him and that you'll learn from him about what it means to have his kind of tenacious, realistic faith. Well, that'll do it for today. As always, if you have questions, you know how to reach me. In the meantime, I wish you nothing but the best. Hope this week is going well for you, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.